thank you so much for the questions that has been submitted. The first one is for Andrew. You refer to the clause 12.3 that says not limited to. What would you say, is there a better way they could have drafted that part to prevent a potential abuse?
Number one, personally, I don't think 12.3 had to be in the Act. I don't think it was necessary. I think nil compensation is theoretically possible if you read the Constitution. I think by putting it in there, we're playing a political game. However, I think the way it should be limited, and I'm trusting the Constitutional Court will do this when it gets there ultimately, is to say the following. When you expropriate, there's compensation. You start with market value, and you deal with other factors, but you must compensate. In a highly exceptional case, we might have nil compensation. And I think we need to define it to say, this is the exception, not the rule. That will immediately say to the courts and to everybody else involved, this is not the normal situation. Because it isn't. It's an exception. And something that's highly exceptional, you approach with great caution in our law. And the burden of proof in proving that it's exceptional rests on the person who alleges. So in legalese, when you put something like that in, you're warning. And I think if the legislature hasn't put it into the terminology, I think the Constitutional Court could and should do that, because it's a huge move from the protection of property, which is not just South African Constitution. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the African Charter protects property rights. We must protect property rights. That's the starting point. The problem is when ideology comes in, we're fighting ideology. And a lot of people are saying we're sick and tired of fighting ideology. We can't fight the Constitutional Court. Well, Rand and I had this discussion. You know, we can't sit back and simply say, because there's a certain ideology out there, we're gonna move away from truth. Even if we get blown and we get chased out, we've still got to bring truth and say, no, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and stand for truth. Losing, according to Andrea Williams, standing is winning. So if we lose, it's okay. We've got to stand with the truth. That in itself is winning. So I'd say, yeah, I think I've answered. Sorry.
Staying on the law side, how do you think can the law assist farmers in terms of making it safe to collaborate with upcoming farmers? I mean, maybe the law makes provision and safety nets for farmers to help others. Is there anything like that, or how can the law?
Now, there's very little in safeguards. You know, I know of people who want to help upcoming farmers. You need to actually have, let's say, for example, you want to make land available. You need to have a proper contract and an agreement. So see your local attorney.
Draft that one.
Yeah, there we go. See your local attorney about. Don't just do it vaguely. Have a contract in place. Say, this is the terms, this is how we're going to do it. If there's money involved changing hands, some people have expressed the willingness to say, well, I can help with capital, making capital available so that you can plant, and then you pay it back like this. And you know, not becoming a bank, but the banks are very tight on agricultural finance. Have it done properly. That's all I can say. I don't think government has anything really in place to facilitate between private parties. They've got other government programs, and they take so long to get the money, and sometimes it's too late and so on. If we can speed it up in the private sphere, it'll help a lot. We need to think about how we're going to do that.
I think that leads to this, the next question, that we can't really look to the government for the solutions if we want to see real change, because that starts in the heart. So I know, John, you have been working with some agricultural ministries and things as well. So I would like to hear from all of you. What is some of the solutions that's currently available? I mean, from a Christian perspective, Christian organizations, if you would like to say something about PALS, PALS, or almost agricultural ministries, what is some of the ministries or Christian organizations involved in the agricultural sphere?
So being a lawyer, you get involved in different cases. our area where I practice, there's a group of farmers, Masiakane, something to do with that word. So a group of farmers who are Christians came together and said, they're not actually from our area, said, we would like to empower black farmers, but you have communal land, you don't have access to the markets. Let us do this. We'll invest in your farm, you do the work, and then we will share the profits. Whatever that we sell, we will split it 50-50. I put in the capital, you put in the labor, which is also the land is something that you own. So in that way, you are empowering farmers. And I thought that was an alternative way that you can empower people.
John?
You spoke about or mentioned PALS. I'm informally involved with PALS and the work that they do, especially in the Malutu area, which is the Eastern Free State area.
Will you explain to the rest of us what they stand for?
They stand for. Yes, PALS is actually an organization which actually has a lot of Christians also inside, and they also partner with, I just forgot this formal agricultural, is a big agricultural.
Agri-SA?
Agri-SA, yes, that's the word, in terms of, rolling out some of those empowering programs. So they're working with the established, they call them established farmers, and the upcoming farmers, mostly is black upcoming farmers. And they, they've got a lot of programs that they take them through, is mentorship and helping them also to access funding when they plan. Actually, the whole journey of an upcoming farmer. So they are there from the beginning. They were also very much involved in our father-in-law empowerment. Recently, I have been asked by one of the leaders to get involved with them in terms of the relationship between the established farmer and also the upcoming farmer. Because of all of these packages and the history and the whole thing of the land, that is affecting their relationship, because the mentee is having different expectation, and the mentor is also having a different expectation. They're coming from different backgrounds. So the intention is to help them with what I call the cultural intelligence and how to navigate those relationship obstacles to improve the working relationship between the two. And that's one of the very amazing program that we have available. Unfortunately, the government is not so much involved in that, although sometimes they take credit in terms of what's happening in that sector. But the idea, it would really to have the government involved, because you already have the willing people and organizations. All you have to do, you have to empower them so that they can do the job and help others. And Andrew spoke about the politics, and that's the nature of politics. We always look for more complicated solutions and, avoid the easy ways, because you can't make votes with easy solutions. It must be a journey. It must go around the mountain, and people must follow you through that journey. And by the time you get there, if you get there, then the people already are exhausted. And that's where we see the people in South Africa are in. They are actually exhausted with these complicated solutions. And I think that the last point I want to make is that the civil movement in South Africa, and that includes the church, is gonna be the game changer in South Africa. And I can see that groundswell in communities, and the church stepping out, and different organizations stepping up. And that's the real, in my own definition, that is bringing power to the people, where the people can determine their future and they can take ownership of where they want to go and where they want to be.
Said it like a true politician.
Oh,
Power to the
I'm,
people.
power to the
I'm still nominating him as Minister of Agriculture.
So that's the blend between the politician and the preacher and the pastor. You mentioned the church, and that's one of the questions as well. It sounds a bit like Erifere, how can the church do something about it? Or someone asked, Diane asked, on which platform do we get to stand? What do we do? Another question is, you've encouraged the church to take the lead in the land reform conversation. I struggle to understand how that could happen, given that the church currently lacks a clear structure or framework to engage with such complex social issues. How do you envision the church responding meaningfully to this matter?
Can I come in immediately?
Yes.
It's a big challenge. I think each church grouping needs to consider this issue. The church is massive. On a micro level, we've got to wake up. We've got to have these discussions in the local church. But on a macro level, there are already groups doing it. Moss and Klaus group with Trevor and Klola, TISA, they're doing it. They're actually busy with it right now. I've been looking at some of their stuff, and there's momentum here. And it also has to do with our race relations as well. What is the church saying about it? The church is saying, oh, well, we've got 94, everybody's happy, bye, let's carry on. We've got a lot of work that we still have to do. So yes, there are groups that are doing it. And there's some groups that won't do it. There's some groups that will step away from it because this topic is too hot and it gets you negative publicity and it's painful. But the problem is anything that's really worthwhile in life has a fair amount of pain involved that we've just got to go through. And the victory and the joy and the end result is going to be worth it. So the long and the short is there are groups that are doing it, and I'm excited. I remember one of the talks I gave was at a church in Pretoria, where the church leader said, I said, well, church must wake up and do it. And the guy said, well, we are doing it. We're having this discussion. We're having this debate in a church. Let's get on with it. It's happening.
Just before John answers your question, there's a discussion that I was having with one of the attendees to say, if this discussion was taking place at a university, I don't think we would have been able to have this conversation constructively, respectively. It would have been very tense. But because we are in the house of the Lord, and people are very sensitive to that. So I think even that, just opening that space and saying, come, have a discussion there. That's a big win on its own.
Amen. I'm reminded about the Academy Week where we focused a lot on the theology at the basis, and it boils down to me again for one thing that everything belongs to the Lord, our view of ownership. But secondly, as we have heard today, this topic is a proxy for a deeper issue, and I think it also comes down to that thing of we are created equally as in the image of God, and that is a macro and a micro level for churches. If that theology gets preached and lived out in a church, it will trickle down into how it plays out in relationships. I mean, a lot of these, the church communities on the platteland is really an important part of the community. And if the theology gets lived and preached that we are equal and that we are together in this country, and we are going to be here together until the Lord says otherwise. The preaching, but also the doing. So I'm reminded by that as well. Any closing remarks from you, John?
Yeah, a friend of mine, when we had this discussion, he actually asked me a very challenging question. And he says, John, I want you to be honest with me. do you think the topic of land in South Africa is really about land? Is it really about land? And I mean, I never thought about it because, you know, we engage with what is on the table, and we never think, you know, could there be an underlying issues? And then he expanded further and he says, you know, I think it's about race more than the land. And it has been made to be about land, whereas the issue is about which race, you know, is owning the land. So are we solving the issue of the land by bringing the laws and everything? If, say, for an example, you had, you know, majority of the black people having the land, would we have the same conversation? And that really made me think that it could be that there are a lot of underlying issues. And the race is at the center of that. And he even made an example because he's very, you know, he's like me. And that's why he's a very good friend of me, where is my English now? He's my friend. Yeah, I'm running out of that English, My airtime is going out.
You can go over to Afrikaans.
Yeah. So he's very confrontative towards the white communities, challenging them, as much as I'm also challenging my black community. And for me, that's amazing because, I mean, that's the picture you need to have. And he said to me, if we can solve the issue of race in South Africa, and that's where I think the church plays a major role, because we're given the ministry of reconciliation. We don't even preach about that in the church. And you know, that's one of the very clear scriptures in terms of what is the mandate, what is the ministry given to the church, the ministry of reconciliation. Because in that ministry of reconciliation, you are bringing hearts together, you are healing wounds. And we are all wounded in South Africa. We have historic wounds, even pre-apartheid. I mean, you mentioned about Mfakani and, you know, the trouble. That was a horrible time that as black people in South Africa, we went. In fact, you know, some people even say, you know, the coming of the British and the Boers in South Africa was a blessing in disguise, because it stopped all those killings. Now you have to focus sort of in the new enemy. But we all have these wounds. Even today, you know, we have wounds. You know, the farmers, the white community now have got a wound in terms of, why are we treated like this? Why are we being killed on our farms? And it seems like the present government is not speaking out, you know, and it's true. You know, we know it's crime, and crime is affecting all of us, but you always have these forums where crime is condemned in terms of what's happening against women and children. You know, the government is very outspoken about that, but the reality is that we've never had even a single minister who stands and say, even the farm killings is wrong. Why do you downplay it? And that's why now we got the Donald Trump involved, because this is a situation we could have actually stopped long time ago by showing that we see your pain. You know, we feel your pain. And together, let's work together to resolve this. So for me, it is actually you know, the burning issue is the race issue. And if the church can come in and facilitate that, I think that will solve a lot of issues that we have. Because I can tell you now as I close, a lot of people, they are not after the land. Majority of our people, they want jobs. That is the number one thing in South Africa. And that land can even produce and give opportunities for jobs, for people to be able to put bread on the table for their children. If we can solve that issue, then we will solve every other issues we have, because the unemployment in South Africa is the main cause of the social ills we have. It doesn't matter how you look at it. But this should be something that, as a collective, we must be able to be creative enough to say, how do we bring the solution on the table? I mean, it's only about 30-something thousand farmers in South Africa. And, you know, we're
20 to 25,000 farming units, basically.
Farming units in South
commercial
Africa.
Units, yeah.
Commercial
That's
units. And we also have other sectors, because his point was, why only farming? Why people don't even think about manufacturing? You know, how do black people access manufacturing? So that for me was a very strong question to say we need to really think about what is the underlying issue here.
There's another few questions that I think portrays that pain that we have talked about, the black pain. I'm just a Christian struggling with a hardened heart. How do we begin to justify white people living in Africa? I can't help but feel that white people living in Africa is a favor extended by black people, and that conversations should stem from that kind of thinking.
That's a very big question, and I want to jump in here. Constitutionally, it's a question that basically says, I don't want to recognize our constitutional settlement. To some extent, and I say that with humility, because it's a very populist argument now to say, listen, we don't want to recognize what happened, where we said, okay, we're going to recognize that there are white people here, we're going to recognize the Ngunis, we're going to recognize the Sotho. What we fail to appreciate sometimes is that we agreed in the 1990s that we cannot undo the past. We cannot unravel pre-1652, 1652, the Huguenots, the English, the Shaka, this one killed this. We can't unravel it. It's not possible. So we said, we're going to go forward in this way. This is almost the discussion. We were having a discussion about this, you know. So what do we want to do? Do we want to round up all the white people? We'll send you to America, and all the black Americans must come live here now. Is that where we want to go? Is this really what God's plan is? Or what about all the black people living in Europe who are French, and must they come back here? And we said, guys, we can't unravel this. We've gone too far down this road. Justifying where we live is something, I didn't make my ancestors' choices. I didn't architect apartheid. I might have been a huge nationalist. I might not have been. I might have been a liberation fighter. I might not have. I can't undo this. I can't tell you what would have happened because it's past. So what we did in our negotiated historic settlements, we said, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to recognize rights, and we're going to recognize certain things, and we're going to move on. But that is a very populist idea that's being thrown around to say, but Africa's for black people, Europe's for white people. But go to the history of Europe and you'll see it's a mess. We've got people driving out other people and conquest here, and then this one takes that one over. And just because we can say, okay, black people are from Africa, and we've got a different color from the East, and we've got a different color here, we must all separate. Look where we're going now. This is falling into the hands of the populist argument on the left and right wing, which says, let's have our homelands. And we rejected that in 1994. We said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to say, you stay there and I stay here. And so I think that that actually goes against what Scripture teaches us about people all being people and equal in the sight of God. We've got to love one another. We've got to build those relationships. We've got to accept one another and say, how are we going forward? I want to ask this question. This is a difficult one. Can I throw in my litmus test round? Is it too hard? Okay, this is me, not Wilberforce or anyone else. I want to tell you, white man or black man, if you believe that you truly love your neighbor and you're racially reconciled, will you let your daughter marry someone from the other race? And I would suggest if your answer is no, I'd say then you don't see them as people. And I had to face it when one of my children dated someone from the other race in my community. And I had to say, what matters? Does that young lady truly love Jesus? And if she does, and the Lord is in that, and I can bless them, then I can say, then I think we can move on. Until that point, no. And then we forget, what do we do with all the colored people in our terms? What are we going to do? Say, you're not people. We're going to, where must they go? On some island somewhere. What are we going to do with them? I see Khutjo wants to add something.
No, just my 2 cents on this. I do recognize the past, that there are certain things that we need to deal with from the past. But if you are talking about having a South Africa that is just black only, yes, you might be able to remove the white people, but the problems are not going to go with the white people. You are still human beings. You're still going to fight amongst yourselves. So I think we really need to get to a point where we say, everyone is South African. How do we work for the empowerment of all South Africans? That's the direction that we need to be, or our hearts needs to be centered on. Not on Andrew is here because I feel sorry for him or I want to drive him out of, no. And if you're a Christian, those considerations, God does not say you must go that way.
Sorry, I can add something here as well. In this discussion, this young man doesn't stand back. He's not a Yabas man, okay?
Definitely
I'm not an old white man who he has to listen to. He challenges me on everything. And it's good and it's right that we do. Okay, so we've got to see this is how it works. Yeah, John.
I'm just reminded of, even if you read the Bible, it says, I don't know if how many of you know that the children of Israel, when they move out of Egypt, it was not only the Israelites. There were a multitude of other nations who were actually part of the Israel that we know today. And it has always been there where people move around. And I mean, that is also something that God has mandated us, go and replenish and move around the earth. So I think this question is the question that comes, and I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong, and I don't want to, but it's coming from a place of unresolved wound. Because, and this is where mostly the political rhetoric is trying to hold us back in the history, back in what happened. And I always say, how far back must you go for you to be satisfied? Because even us in South Africa, the Khoisan can come and say, but we were the first here. So how far must you really go? And I want to agree with Khutjo that the only way is to look forward. You acknowledge the past and you learn from the past, but we are here, we are all here. The white people are here and they are not going anywhere. And I'm glad that most of them have said, no, we will not be refugees. And I'm not speaking bad on those who made those decisions, because sometimes maybe they have personal reasons. Maybe they were thinking of their little ones and they want to give their little ones opportunities. I mean, people move around all the times. We've got black people who are now living in America. One of my friends, my good friend.
I'm in Matatiele.
You are now
and
in
I'm from
Matatiele.
Limpopo.
Yes. And I don't want to say for them to choose to go to America. And I mean, I had actually one of my friends, and my wife can testify to that. They're struggling a lot and financially, and they've got a very special child that needs a very special treatment. And I said to him, you know, on a personal level, why don't you consider going to America? If there is an opportunity that your child can be close to very good, doctors. So for me, it's not about the people who make the choice, because anyone can make a choice. The problem I have is the political thing around it, to paint the South Africans, and especially white South Africans, as people who do not see themselves as Africans. And also some of us, not all the black people, who would really be glad if the white people will admit that they are not Africans, so they have to be refugees in another country. So, and I always emphasize this, black people are here to stay in South Africa. The Khoisan people must accept it. And the white people are here to stay in South Africa. It's not gonna change. I tell you now, it's not gonna change even if we go to war. We can risk the war. There are a lot of people who want war to happen in South Africa, and they think if we go to war, then it will solve. It will not solve it. In fact, it will divide this country even further. We will have many countries within the same country. The only solution is to come back to the table and say, how can we together create a future where my children, your children, can actually live safely and can also be able to call this place a home and to live here, because this has been ordained by God. South Africa is so blessed. There's a reason why Mandela's and all of those people made a decision, especially those who were in the exile. There's a reason why they came to a conclusion that we're not going to chase, the white people like other countries did. And I mean, Mandela, in one of his speeches, he actually explained that. We were in the exile. We saw what happened with those countries where they have chased people out. And even today, they are still struggling. So for us to even get our freedom later, compared to other African countries, it was actually a blessing in disguise. Because we were in their countries. We saw the struggles. We saw the dictatorships. We saw how they oppressed their own people after they have got rid of other races in their countries. And I think the vision was to create a South Africa. And the whole dream about Rainbow Nation was not just a political statement. For me, it was also a prophetic statement. Because this is what God is doing in South Africa, to say, at the tip of Africa, there will be a melting pot. And out of that melting pot, this will be there will come a beautiful colors that will color the rest of the world. That's why we are champions in the human rights and all of these things, although we have taken it, too much, too far. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm being a pastor now.
Thank you so much. I'm reminded through this conversation also that we are South Africans if we live here, firstly. Secondly, we are created in the image of God. Thirdly, we are all sinners. We are all sinners. I had experience in a place in our country which is exclusive. And I faced a situation where the person bamboozled us. And I was reminded that you cannot run from sin. You cannot run from sin. There's nowhere on the face of this earth that you're going to run and be free from the experience of other people's sin. And also the reminder of this earth and everything on it is going to vanish away. And we are going to stand, not with our land, not with what we own, not even with our bank account, our title deeds, not even with our passport. We're going to stand before the throne of God, and He's going to ask us, do we know Him? And let's not harbor things for ourselves that makes it difficult to stand there and sing and worship with all nations, with all generations, for eternity together.